Clark Gable and Robert Taylor were well known as MGM Golden Boys. They carried each other's coffins, had the same success, and shared the same studio. However, there was a single incident that almost ended their friendship forever. Hollywood celebrities were expected to serve their country throughout the war years. Taylor lost all respect for the man everyone dubbed king as a result of what he saw that day. Because it would have ruined Gable's reputation, the tale was kept under wraps for decades. But everything people believed to be true was altered when the truth about what had transpired was revealed. On August 5, 1911, Spangler Arlington Brew was born in Philly, Nebraska, a tiny farming hamlet. So, from the beginning, the name alone became problematic. His father, Spangler Andrew Brugg, a farmer who went on to become an osteopath, gave it to him. Teachers at school frequently mispronounced him and referred to him as Arlington or Arlie. To put it simply, the German sound of it made things even more difficult during World War I. He was frequently mocked by children and felt like an outsider when anti-German sentiment was strong. In honor of a distant relative, his mother had chosen the name, but it only made her son's early years more challenging. His initial passion was music. He learned to play the cello at Beatrice High School under Professor Herbert E. Gray in Lincoln. Gray encouraged him to pursue a career in classical music because he sensed something exceptional in him. Like his father, Taylor aspired to become a doctor. With the intention of pursuing a pre-medical career, he enrolled in Doane College in Crete, Nebraska. He made little money performing in a musical trio on Clay Center's KMJ radio for 2 summers while honing his acting abilities. When Taylor began performing in university plays, Gray became enraged because he thought he had the talent to play with great orchestras, was a famous athlete as well. In the late 1920s, he became a local hero and set track and field records at Beatrice High School. Newspapers in Lincoln and Omaha, in addition to Beatrice, carried his name. He wasn't confined to a single occasion. He demonstrated his innate coordination by excelling in a number of them. And tenacity. Scholarships from colleges were offered to him. He carried with him throughout his life the discipline of rigorous diets, early workouts, and a competitive mindset. Later on, his physical prowess would make him ideal for the daring parts for which he gained notoriety. When Professor Gray relocated to California to teach at Pomona College, it was the most significant turning point. In the early 1930s, Taylor followed him, which was a bold move for someone from a low-income background. He intended to continue his studies in music and medicine in California, viewing it as a stopgap before going back home. However, Gray urged him to take advantage of all that college had to offer, including the theater group. It was impossible to overlook his remarkable appearance and effortless stage presence. Despite Gray's concerns that it would divert him from music, he soon found himself acting in play. An MGM talent scout noticed Taylor in 1932 when he was performing as Captain Stanhope in a Journey's End performance at Pomona College. He was given a contract by the scout that started at $35 a week. Despite its modest beginnings, it would become into one of Hollywood's most prosperous careers. The first thing MGM did when they took over his image was to remove his given name. Robert Taylor took Spangler Arlington Brew's place. He was not consulted in the choice reached by Louis B. Mayer and Ida Koverman. They said that the new moniker would increase ticket sales and was more powerful and American. It marked the start of Taylor losing aspects of who he was. Later, he pondered whether the Nebraska youngster was still there in any way. He was famous yet troubled by his appearance. His athletic frame, blue eyes, and well-proportioned features made him nearly too attractive. He was rejected by male audiences as being too attractive. And gossip on his private life started to spread. He was cast by MGM opposite strong older ladies like Barbara Stanwyck and Greta Garbo, which only served to stoke rumors. Taylor didn't like the picture. He felt trapped by it. He desired to have his acting respected, not only his face. Made the decision to alter his image. He was cast in more challenging parts such as The Crowd Roars and Billy the Kid. The makeup artist tried to give his features a more rugged appearance. He was frequently seen in bathing scenes, shirtless, sweating, and in tough settings in publicity pictures. They even taught him new ways to move, speak, and walk. In other respects, it made his image seem even more manufactured, even though the intention was to make him appear formidable. His pay increased from $35 per week at the beginning to $5,000 per week by the late 1930s. However, there were conditions attached. Unlike any other performer at the time, he had a 25-year contract with MGM. He was moved from romantic lead to every other part by the studio. Western stars to action heroes as they saw fit. He never turned down a part. According to industry sources, his devotion to MGM occasionally made him uninteresting to the media. Additionally, he had to answer to both his wife and the studio, which limited his personal independence. He played with Greta Garbo in Camille, which was his breakthrough film in 1936. He portrayed Armand, a young man who fell in love with Marguerite, her tragic character. He received acclaim from critics who pointed out that he exceeded expectations in such a tough job. The movie brought in $2,842,000 and demonstrated his depth as an actor. At first, Garbo thought he was inexperienced, but she eventually came to appreciate his commitment. Finally proving to viewers that Robert Taylor was more than just a lovely face, Camille went on to become one of the greatest romantic movies of its era. When Stanwyck, Barbara, on May 14, 1939, she married Robert Taylor, and Hollywood was unable to stop talking. Even though there was just a 3-year age difference at the time, it was enough for rumors to go throughout the studio complex. The industry frequently referred to Barbara's age of 31 as elderly for a leading lady. At the age of 28, Taylor, a charming young man from a small Nebraskan town, had emerged as MGM's ideal romantic partner. Barbara was a strong, independent actress who had previously been married once and had her own ranch. In contrast, Taylor was still becoming used to Hollywood culture. Their ages weren't the only topic of conversation. It was a question of power. They made jokes about her robbing the cradle. Some even referred to her as his mother figure. She had established her reputation with bold movies like Babyface and earned a lot more money than he did. Because of the relationship's inversion of the typical roles, it became the talk of the town at every party. The actual wedding was a Hollywood production. Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, did more than just support the match. He gave the order. After informing Taylor that he would have to wed her, he managed the entire affair. They exchanged vows in San Diego just after midnight because they were so superstitious about the number 13. To keep quiet, they went by their true identities, Spangler Arlington Broom and Ruby Catherine Stevens. The matron of honor was Zeppo Marx's wife, Marion Marx, who also organized their blind date. A best man who had been selected by the studio took the place of Taylor's own family. Love wasn't the driving force behind the day. Damage control was the goal. For MGM to quell rumors regarding both stars, a flawless heterosexual marriage was necessary. To make the announcement, Mayer even assembled reporters in Beverly Hills. Insiders secretly scoffed at how the whole thing felt orchestrated. The studio's plan had been so clear. On February 5, 1932, Barbara adopted a boy named Anthony Dion Fay, 7 years prior to her marriage to Taylor. She had thought that having a child would help her and her first husband, Frank Fay, get through their difficult marriage. She retained custody of Tony after the divorce, although she never grew close to him. She appeared unable of showing him affection because of the severe wounds from her own childhood abandonment. Tony was just 7 years old when Taylor joined the family. The youngster now had a mother who treated him like an unwanted guest and a stepfather who hardly paid him any attention. She didn't talk about him at all and kept his picture concealed in her closet. The distance got irreversible as he grew older. She refused to see him, even when he attempted to visit her while she was near death. Tony should forget she was his mother, her brother advised. In her will, she left him nothing. Still hoping for a relationship that never materialized, Tony passed away in 2006. Taylor's own actions caused a number of scandals. He started a romance with Lana Turner in 1941 while making Johnny Eager. He boasted to his pals about his obsession with her and his need to spend at least one moment with her. Barbara reportedly tried suicide as a result of the shock she had upon learning the news. However, this was only one betrayal in a series. While filming Quo Vadis in Rome in 1950, Taylor publicly courted Italian extra Lee DeLeo. He was captured on camera departing the brothel and made no effort to conceal their friendship. For Barbara, the shame was immense. Taylor appeared to be trying to pressure her into filing for divorce. To face him, she took a plane to Rome. They also pretended to be a happy couple for the cameras for 6 weeks while discreetly working out the terms of their divorce. She was shocked when he readily accepted her offer of divorce when she eventually made it. Then she understood that he had planned his relations to force her to let go, made a decision in February 1943 that took everyone by surprise. He was much too old to be drafted at 32. He had every legal excuse to avoid military, was married, and contributed significantly to the war effort at home. The studios wanted their stars to sell war bonds, stay in the United States, and make patriotic movies. But Taylor joined the U.S. military on February 9, 1943. He was a member of the Naval Air Corps. He only postponed until Song of Russia was completed, at which point he reported for duty in August. He was accepted by the Navy, but they soon determined he was too old to fight. Rather than fighting abroad, he was tasked with training pilots after rising to the rank of lieutenant junior grade. It hurt. His instructions kept him in the United States despite his desire to serve on the front lines. He nevertheless earned his wings on January 11, 1944, after proving to be among the finest in his class and completing instructor training in 5th place. The 17 Navy training videos he produced between 1943 and 1945 had the most enduring influence. These were not your average propaganda pieces. They were expertly designed instructional resources that addressed everything from the fundamentals of aviation to battle tactics. Flight Sense is a single movie, instructed pilots in the use of the Stearman N2S aircraft. To keep the training interesting, he even incorporated humor. The New York Times in particular gave him high marks for his narration of the 1944 documentary, The Fighting Lady. The fact that Taylor had never flown a military aircraft prior to enrolling added to the work's extraordinary quality. He began at zero, had rigorous training in New Orleans, and became an expert pilot and instructor. He gained notoriety at the Naval Air Station in Livermore, California, for his ability to communicate difficult ideas in a straightforward manner that his pupils found memorable. What had been regarded as one of Hollywood's most stable marriages came to an end when Barbara Stanwyck appeared in court and filed for divorce from Robert Taylor in February 1951. They had spent 12 years together. The industry was taken aback by the move, since it started out as a bluff. Taylor began a highly publicized romance with Italian actress Lee DeLeo in 1950 while they were filming Quo Vadis in Rome. In an attempt to get him to return to her, Stanwyck flew to confront him and threaten divorce. Rather, he consented without question. For him, the financial terms were punishing. Until she remarried or passed away, she was given 15% of his gross income. She never got married again and got every penny. Additionally, she maintained complete custody of Tony Dion, her adopted son, excluding Taylor from all aspects of the boy's life. Taylor accepted a position that year that permanently altered the course of his career. William A. Wellman directed the $2.02 million Western westward, The Women. A wagon master led 150 women from Chicago to California to marry settlers, according to the story. The movie, which made almost $4 million worldwide, demonstrated that he was capable of more than just portraying attractive romantic leads. In contrast to the glitzy parts he had previously played, his character was tough and decisive. The movie struck a surprising chord. 33 marriages resulted from a Spanish village that was inspired by the film organizing its own caravan of women decades later. He went back to Rome for Quo Vadis that same year, the priciest movie ever made by MGM. A young Sophia Loren was included as an extra, and there were an incredible 32,000 costumes. Taylor, who was opposite Deborah Kerr, played Marcus Vinicius. With $11 on $143 million in the US and Canada, and $9,194 million abroad, The movie helped MGM out of its financial bind. It became 1951's highest-grossing movie and demonstrated Taylor's versatility as a person. But he and MGM had a complex relationship. By the late 1950s, he was the last big star from the studio's heyday to still be bound by a contract that had been in place since 1933. Playing on Taylor's gratitude and loyalty, studio head Louis B. Mayer kept his pay lower than other well-known figures for years. Taylor started concentrating on westerns around the middle of the 1950s, his preferred genre. He founded Robert Taylor Productions after his contract expired in 1958, and he featured in The Detectives from 1959 until 1962. He was still used by MGM, who called him back for The Western Cattle King in 1963. In the 1949 film Conspirator, Taylor met a young Elizabeth Taylor. Even though she was just 16, the age difference was so pronounced that several people felt they appeared to be father and daughter on film, supporting her academic endeavors and recognizing her abilities. In 1952, they got back together for Ivanhoe, a movie she didn't like, but which made $11 million in rentals and was one of MGM's highest-grossing films. MGM set up a meeting between Taylor and Ursula Weisz, a German actress, in 1952. The Coconut Grove is where they first met. She later recalled that when he took her to the dance floor, she felt like she was in seventh heaven. However, Taylor, he dated people, including his ex-wife, but remained cautious after his divorce. After Ursula gave him a final ultimatum, they were married in a modest ceremony on a boat in Wyoming on May 23, 1954. Manuela and Michael, Ursula's two children from her previous marriage, were also influenced by the struggles of war-torn Germany. They had a hard time adjusting to Hollywood life, especially with Taylor's high standards. As time went on, Michael's problems got worse, resulting in the startling incident in 1964 when he attempted to poison George Thays, his real father, at the age of 18. After being found guilty, he spent a year in a reformatory. Later, Taylor and Ursula had two children of their own, Tessa, a daughter, and Terrence, a son born in 1955. They constructed a cozy house on a ranch in the San Fernando Valley in 1959. They were characterized by friends as a loving pair, where, in contrast to the stern character depicted on TV, Tessa recalled her father as being affectionate and amusing. Many Hollywood celebrities would have shied away from the danger that Robert Taylor took in 1959. When he entered the television industry, most performers believed it was beneath them. The move surprised peers, yet his series The Detectives proved him correct. It began as a 30-minute crime drama on ABC and aired for 2 seasons before transferring to NBC, extending to a full hour and being retitled Robert Taylor's Detectives. Across its 97 episodes, Taylor played Captain Matt Holbrook, a bright and determined leader of an elite police force. The show drew in future figures like Adam West, years before Batman, and even received writings from Gene Roddenberry, who would go on to establish Star Trek. For a movie star of his status, this wasn't just a fresh job. It was a daring step into a changing business. By 1966, another unexpected chance presented. Ronald Reagan, a personal friend, was leaving Death Valley days to run for governor. Supplanted him as both host and occasional actor, taking over from a guy who would become president. Provided the event an odd blend of Hollywood and politics. Reagan and Taylor's friendship goes back decades, and when Taylor died, it was Reagan who delivered the eulogy. Taylor's run kept the series strong and showed his tremendous devotion to television at a period when few film stars embraced it so totally. 8 years previously, in 1958, Taylor had walked away from MGM. This was no ordinary exit. His contract had lasted 24 years, the longest in Hollywood history. Started in 1934 when he was just 23. His first pay was barely $35 a week. By 1940, he was making $5,000 a week, working with superstars like Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, and Elizabeth Taylor. He featured in almost 80 films before departing. The shift signaled the end of an era when actors stayed loyal to a single studio for life. After MGM, the employment was steady, but often disappointing. Taylor later acknowledged he wasn't proud of several of the films he made during this period. He now grabbed what was available after the big studio parts vanished. Although there were still some high-caliber moments, such as his 1958 Party Girl, his last MGM picture, the shift was evident. He had to adjust without the studio's help. He moved farther into television as a result of that change, where the detectives became a distinctive feature. Behind the scenes, the effects of a lifetime habit were already being felt. For decades, Taylor had smoked more than 60 cigarettes a day, 3 packs a day, since he was a little lad. He started to feel exhausted and worn out by the spring of 1968, when he was 57. The dyspnea continued to worsen, but he attributed it to age or overwork. The reality was heartbreaking when he eventually sought medical attention. It was most likely lung cancer, brought on by his frequent smoking. He was initially diagnosed with valley fever. Taylor, however, calmly stated, "Oh sure, it's cancer all right, lung cancer," confirming the reality. On October 8, 1968, he underwent cobalt radiation treatment and underwent major surgery to remove his right lung. Surprisingly, he continued to smoke right up until the procedure. Amazingly, his addiction continued to control him even after the diagnosis. He continued to work. He continued to focus on his Death Valley days. Taylor continued to appear on TV while battling for his life while Ronald Reagan's career shifted toward politics. He filmed as much as he could, even appearing in episodes in between hospital stints and treatments. He displayed incredible strength throughout this time, but at a high physical cost. The family then experienced another catastrophe in May 1969. Michael Thays, Taylor's stepson, was only 23 when he overdosed on drugs in his Los Angeles apartment. 2 weeks prior to Taylor's own death, this occurred. Ursula Thays, Taylor's wife, had a son named Michael. Taylor had regarded him as his own, but from her previous marriage, it was awful to lose twice. Taylor and Michael were buried next to one other. Robert Taylor passed away at 10:30 a.m. on June 8, 1969, in Santa Monica's St. John's Hospital. He was 57. In his last moments, Ursula was present. His glitzy MGM days, when he was making more than $50,000 a week, were a long cry from this. And residing on a 113-acre ranch that is home to livestock and horses. Over the course of his 35-year career, he starred in over 70 films and 2 successful television shows. One of the last genuine stars of Hollywood's heyday vanished with his passing. On June 11, 1969, Ronald Reagan stood in front of the Church of the Recession. As he spoke, his voice caught. The future president found it difficult to remain composed as he bid his friend Robert Taylor farewell. He was more than just a gorgeous face, according to Reagan. He described a man who possessed quiet dignity, valued his craft, and was an expert at it. The tape now sits in the Reagan Presidential Library, a treasured piece of California's political and film history, because the moment was so potent. Reagan's political activity was influenced by their connection, which had been established in the conservative circles of old Hollywood. Reagan portrayed Taylor as the epitome of Midwestern decency in his tribute, a man whose death left a void in a field that was already losing its elite. There was another legend for whom Taylor had been there. He carried Clark Gable's casket into the same church where he would eventually be buried on November 19, 1960, walking with Spencer Tracy and James Stewart. The funeral was strictly guarded, formal, and included military honors. It was an uncommon reunion of MGM most talented men who had vying for parts but held each other in the highest regard. Gable's choice of Taylor as a pallbearer demonstrated his respect for him and his recognition of a career that paralleled his own transformation from romantic lead to tough hero. It seemed like an entire era came to an end when Taylor passed away on June 8, 1969, at the age of just 57. He set a record of 24 years under contract with MGM that would never be surpassed. He had survived the rise and fall of the studio system from 1934 to 1958, outliving industry titans like Gable, Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and Joan Crawford. By the time he left, the business was moving in the direction of Hollywood's new wave of directors. In addition to the loss of a man, his passing signified the demise of a system that had created stars from the ground up. For his wife, Ursula Teese, who had only been married for 2 weeks, the blow was much more severe. She discovered her son Michael dead after a heroin overdose on May 26. He was 24. Throughout his turbulent existence, Michael had served time for attempting to poison his own father. Taylor, who was already losing his fight with lung cancer, was never informed by Ursula. She organized both funerals by herself, preserving herself for her children who are still alive. As a silent reminder of the family's tragic tragedy, Taylor and Michael are now buried next to each other. Both Taylor had a hidden tempest of insecurities despite his notoriety as the man with the ideal profile. His greatest dream, he reportedly told Louise Rayner, was to buy 10 well-tailored suits since he was so fascinated with his wardrobe. He thought they could reconcile for what he perceived to be a lack of acting ability. Actually, he was constantly looking for parts that would demonstrate that he was more than just a good-looking man. He started deviating from the leading man stereotype in 1941 by playing darker parts like Johnny Eager and Billy the Kid. Nevertheless, he frequently dismissed his accomplishment, claiming that acting was the simplest job in the world and attributing success to luck rather than skill. His duty throughout the war revealed a whole another aspect. He enlisted in the Naval Air Corps at age 32. He was told he was too old to serve overseas, despite his desire for combat action. Rather, he dedicated his time to narrating the combat documentary The Fighting Lady, serving as a flight instructor, and directing 17 Navy training videos. Hollywood's protective hand kept him in the United States, even if he desired danger. He continued to get involved in politics after the war, testifying before Congress against suspected communists and co-founding the Motion Picture Alliance to uphold American values. When his films were outlawed in some European countries, it cost him money, but he refused to change his mind. Despite the intrigues and gossip that surrounded him, loyalty was what he valued most. He stayed close to Reagan and maintained a friendship with Jack Benny for decades. Even Barbara Stanwyck, his ex-wife, who was entitled to a portion of his income following their divorce, attended his funeral, remained close friends with people whose politics differed from his own, such as Humphrey Bogart, and had solid professional relationships with directors he trusted. He succeeded Reagan as presenter of Death Valley Days in his later years. Evidence that Robert Taylor valued interpersonal relationships over practicality in the workplace.